Hi all, I have another amazing game to show you from TCEC Season 17 Super Final. So this is in round 16. Leela was playing white against Stockfish, the opening book given e4 g6, the modern defense, or raw bash. d4 d6, we see knight c3 a6, and this is the end of the book given. Now this move a6 has been used by Tiger Hillard Person, and it's been called quite often the Tiger Modern, and he has a couple of excellent books on it. So here Tiger is a grandmaster from Malmo, Swedish champion in 2007 and 2008, and the author of the books 2005 and new edition 2014, which address his favourite openings. So this is not in this particular move order. He usually actually plays bishop g7, but we're transposing to some of his games with this move order eventually. So his move order is actually e4 g6, d4 bishop g7, knight c3 d6, followed by a6 later. Okay, so this a6 move is very, very interesting. We have here bishop e3, bishop g7, h4, and now h5 is played by Stockfish. So Leela plays knight h3, and actually Stockfish just snaps off that light square bishop. Now you might have noticed other videos where Stockfish has given up a bishop here. Is this controversial or not, this light square bishop? Well, let's see what happened. Rook takes h3, knight d7, queen e2 is played. There has been a high level grandmaster game with queen d2 from this exact position, and that was a quick draw though after c5. This was a very quick draw. It was Mayer against Vidler in 2009. So anyway, queen e2, you might think, well, Leela hasn't got the option with queen e2. It's slightly different. It hems in that bishop, and it doesn't have the option of bishop h6 if ever this knight moves. You might think if that might be useful, this battery. So, you know, queen e2 though has some other perks to it. Queen c8, white castles queenside. c5, we see king b1, b5. Now knight d5, and this is actually, with the king in the centre, there are some dangers for black, and you can see actually if the knight moves, then there's knight b6, forking queen and rook. There are also some more subtle dangers here. Stockfish bypasses quite a lot with knight gf6, as you might expect. If e6, for example, you might think, well, there's nothing spectacular about this, is there? The knight would have to be going back. Actually here, guess what white can play, which is very useful in this position. If I give you 5 seconds to pause the video, white to play here. This is just a variation test. Okay? In fact, because the king's in the centre, and that is a weakness of the last move d6, you can forget about the knight and just play bishop f4. This apparently works quite well. This keeps the king in the centre, and it's very, very dangerous. There's very, very dangerous compensation here. You can see building up, maybe with this d pawn as a hook for e7. White can later use and win the queen, for example. It can be disaster. So yeah, but it's all pretty much sidestepped behind the scenes by Stockfish's move. After knight d5, we have knight gf6. Okay, so d takes c5, knight takes, e takes, knight takes c5. It seems black's done well here in many respects. Bishop d4, now black castles. Rook e3, we see queen f5. It seems as though has Leela got a ferocious attack against black, or has black got potential here on the queen side? We see g3. You might wonder, hold on a sec, what about this pawn? If rook takes e7, Stockfish has got it covered as you might expect. Bishop takes, and here queen f6 is pretty much annoying. It actually hits both rooks, and also it's looking at that pawn. If here knight e6 is possible as an interruption tactic to at least get a draw, and if black doesn't want to do a seesaw mechanism like that to force a draw, black can also elect to take this pawn and then come back. So this will be absolutely fine for black anyway, and black might even have a small edge there. So g3 was played, safeguarding the h4 pawn. Bishop f6, okay, so that's protecting e7 now. as well. F3. We have bishop takes now. Rook takes. Rook A7. This looks interesting. Okay, so in fact here, so it's pretty tactical, this position. We have actually Queen D2 being played, so Leela's not indulging any tactics unnecessarily. So we have Queen F6, A3, Rook B7, Rook F4, Queen H8. Now this looks a little bit strange, doesn't it? But actually it's dual purpose. It's not just attacking B2 on the diagonal, and sometimes, you know, that might be a concern. It also means that any G4, G takes, the structure can be kept intact with Queen takes H5. You see that white's actually fragmented pawns there. And so this is a structural consideration, or you might think, well, do that anyway, because the king's over there, you want to open up the king. We see Queen E1, and as an example here, instead of Queen E1, G4, for example, and say white could play like this and accept structural damage and accept even D5 dropping off. Say this position, it looks a little bit strange to do this, but white might have some decent prospects here. If, for example, black dared to take there, then F4, and all of a sudden, you know, that G-file could be quite dangerous. But is this the way Leela wants to play the position, to try and go for the king? It's a pretty violent way of playing the position, and if black has to get desperate, black's just losing material. But otherwise, you know, this H-file and the G-file, it is kind of an exposed king. But Leela's treatment here is different, actually. We're about to see Queen E1, Rook E8. We see G4. You might think, well, this is for G takes, right? Queen H6. We have actually Rook B4. Okay, so that keeps that pawn locked down with B5 under fire. Queen H8. The rook drops back though. Queen H6, Rook B4, so some messing around. But now G5. You might think, what? G5, because doesn't black's position look airtight? It's not as if a form pawn has been installed, although that's a reasonably aggressive pawn, but isn't this mostly harmless? G5. So an attempt to rip open the position with G takes is, I guess, what many of us would consider. And even if D5 drops, you know, Rook G4, this is gaining a tempo. Black has to take on D5, being materialistic. After F4, this actually, it's quite promising, as mentioned. But yeah, Leela's treatment here looks a little bit on the strange side, G5. Because it kind of excuses the dark square weaknesses, actually, in a way. But, okay, let's see. King H7, King A2, Rook A7. There's some messing around here for a bit. Okay. E5 there, that looks like a committal move. And in fact, Leela took that, doesn't want to leave black with that structure. So took, so change the structure there. Okay, now D5 here, another change of structure. And it looks as though the E5 point is a concern for black. Can that be a lockdown point? So the bishop guards C4 here, and in fact, after knight C4, bishop just takes there. And now we see this lockdown point on E5, and there's quite a lot of shuffling, actually. So let's just rapidly go through the shuffling until something happens of mega excitement value. So some shuffling. It's as though black's king's pretty secure. So this pawn move, okay, is it going any further? Okay, that threatens the king indirectly. So some more shuffling, some more shuffling, and we get a position where it seems as though, yeah, Leela can't really do too much. I mean, there is a B2 issue sometimes, and we get this position coming up after move 80. Actually, we're at move 80 here, 81. Now move 82, I guess what Leela plays in this position for 5 points. Okay, and this is, I checked Stockfish, it's not a Stockfish recommendation in the top 5. Okay, Leela actually plays F5, And yeah, there is this balance here between losing the pawn, because black did take that. There's no immediate destructive aspect of this, but this pawn is now mobile. There is a constant threat of g6 sometimes, and also you see that this pawn's weakened. But so the traditional engine heuristic of material up is being put in contrast here to the dynamics here of this pawn being mobile and these pawns being slightly fragmented. That balance, that tension balance, is okay right now actually. Black really can't seem to, because of this lockdown on the dark squares, black really can't capitalize on that, surely, because you know, that if that pawn ever moves, it's going to be really vulnerable, and white's going to crash through potentially the f-file. So black has to keep solid, but you know, Stockfish is a patient character here in this game, and just waits and waits actually. So we get even more endless shuffling. So we have to wait for the next major event. I'll wake you up, don't worry. This is asynchronous messaging. I'll wake you up when something happens. I'll message you. So this is after move 100. And so nothing much is happening. There's a threat of checkmate that has to be addressed. Okay, queen e2, protecting b2. I told you I'd wake you up if something happened. And then this queen wants to come in. It seems Leela's queen's being aggressive over here. Okay, so you know, this tension balance between the extra pawn and the mobility and the fragmentation is still there, right? It's still there. And okay, I'm about to wake you up. Really, Leela? Really? This position at move 130. Oh, I showed you it by accident. Leela just gave up another pawn at move 130. Why? Why? Now this is a little bit more complex to understand. Why would Leela give up this pawn? Is it to break the 50 move rule or something? So 130, this move g6, giving up another pawn. Is there a balance between the two pawns and the king safety issues? Let's see. Can Stockfish defend? It does actually take that pawn. It's too dangerous otherwise, one would imagine, to leave it anyway. So the rook just goes back. Is this really enough compensation? Now sometimes in the past, Leela, and Leela was in great time pressure, sometimes in the past against normal engines, Leela just breaks through with very low time, breaks through with such pawn sacrifices. There have been brilliancies in the history of TCEC with Leela. But the two pawns, are they really justifiable here? Rook g2, so there's some concrete threats emerging here like rook g5. This looks a little bit scary. Rook g8, but now one pair of rooks comes off. Does that relieve any defensive issues? Rook g1. This is the point of resourcefulness from Stockfish. Guess what Stockfish plays here off the rook attacks the queen. 5 seconds. Great move here from Stockfish. And it really does start to challenge this double pawn sack concept. This next move. So for, let's say 100 points, black to play. Can you spot what black plays? Do you move your queen or something else? Okay. Stockfish plays e5 here. Finally, the pawns are getting mobilized. That e5 lockdown point is finally released. So, you know, rook takes this. This looks great for black to be able to take on d4 there. So we see queen c5. You know, if queen takes, then queen takes g1. So if rook takes, then that looks good for black. So we see queen c5, queen f7. So yeah, the queen is holding up d5 and looking at, you know, protecting these. And this rook can actually potentially switch over here sometimes. Rook g5, we see rook g5. Rook g6 is played. And this is super cunning because there are issues for the white king sometimes in these variations, or immediately just winning the rook, you know, check and queen takes a5 sometimes. White does take here, so yeah, it looks as though black's going to get some counterplay though now. as well as that rook being threatened. So we see rook h6 though. Actually, this is quite an important tactical moment that needs some explanation and technical analysis here. So what is going on here? Why is rook h6 forced? Well, if king g8, then check here is lethal. If queen f8, then can you spot what white plays? Okay, rook h8 check. Yeah, so the king can be exposed sometimes, and white can use that to win material. In this line, let's have a look again here. If king g7, then it's even worse. Queen h8 is checkmate. Now, more subtle here, if this rook h6 wasn't played, is if king g7 is played. You might think, well, isn't that plausible? Because black does have, well, if the queen wasn't on g1, there might be an issue, or taking here, there might be an issue. But the thing is, in this position, it seems as though queen f2 is quite a powerful move in the circumstance, with the rook on the fifth, putting pressure on all these pawns. So if f4, then the e5 pawn can drop, and this is just not enough for black. The king's too exposed. It's not quick enough, this pawn. It seems as though white's got a ton of checks to play out, and technically it's drawing. So that's quite fascinating, actually. So this has all been seen. It must have all been seen, basically. King g7 is just not good enough after queen f2. Also, even worse here, instead of f4, you might think, well, why give up e5? If rook f6, then queen g3 check is winning e5 anyway. Sometimes after the check, taking on e5. And here, in fact, black's in big trouble after this. Yeah, it's going to be winning material. Again, there's that neat tactical idea of deflecting the king away from the queen with rook h7. So you can see there's underlying dangers here. And actually, this is a really super accurate move, rook h6, by Stockfish in this position to play rook h6 here. Okay. Rook g5 is played. If rook takes h6, then here, this position, you know, black's doing quite well. So we have rook g5 from Leela. And now rook takes h4. And this is starting to look quite bleak now for white. Not just two pawns down, but black's actually got attacking prospects here. You can see that sometimes, you know, this back row, and maybe, you know, the queen comes on the diagonal, it's dangerous. So the rook is actually going back defensively, and now a very dangerous passed pawn or two is heading in white's direction. Queen f2, yeah, white's on the defensive, 2 pawns down. Leela has basically self-destructed. Leela was, I saw that, you know, the live broadcast, Leela was in severe time pressure, living on the increment, so to speak. But there's still a big issue here of how black concretely wins this. Or is there? The pawns look very impressive right now, super impressive. But if they step a bit too far out, then maybe, you know, there's some king checks which are going to be available. We see queen c7, queen e3, queen f7. And here it looks as though, hold on, well, Stockfish is not that convinced, is it, about making progress? 2 extra pawns, rook h3, we see rook d1, queen b7, so that's looking at sometimes playing queen b3, rook b1, queen f7, queen f2, and here something remarkable happens here now at move 155, which, yeah, truly was something to behold. And let me point you to that as a clue. That quotation by Wilhelm Steinitz, the king is a fighting piece, use it. So in this position, on move 155, Stockfish to play, guess what move Stockfish played for 1,000 points, especially if you can see the follow-up continuation. This is pretty outrageous stuff. So black to play here, what would you consider playing here? Okay, I'm about to reveal it. Black to play, played King G6. It's the power behind this move as well. It's not just this move. Or is the king just going to go back if it's checked? What's the intention behind the move? Has it got some naughty intention here or not? What on earth is going on here with King G6? Where is the king going? This is now mysterious. Is this a way of consolidating 2 extra pawns? So Leela plays a check. As Fisher also said, you know, Patzer sees a check, Patzer plays a check, but Leela's not such Patzer. King F5, Queen C5, and the king goes to F4. It's like the king wants to get involved in increasing the mobility of the pawns here. Is it getting a bit dangerous? Queen D6 check, King E3. I think this requires quite significant calculation sometimes to do this. Check, King E2, Queen D4. What is the point of all this? What is the point of the king, you know, to face all these threats? You know, potentially is this a way of self-mating? The point is revealed. The king here is supporting F2. This further ties down the white resources. This F2, it's quite an achievement, and the king quite proud of helping out there. The majestic hands of God, Maradona, springs to mind for some reason. Okay, anyway, so Queen D4 check. We see King F3, Queen D1 check, King F4, Queen D2 check, E3. So that helping hand by the king to push through that F2. So there's still two mega dangerous now passed pawns. And the king, having done that, basically goes back. Goes back up the board. And I just have not seen anything like this in Engine Chess. This is just very strange that the king did that. I mean, how many engines would even think of doing that? It's just crazy. But the pawns are a little bit more dangerous than before. So, okay, we see Rook G7. And, yeah, this now we have a pawn queening. Yeah, it looks as though white's in severe trouble here. So Rook G7, F1 queening. Queen takes D5 check. Check. And we see here King F8 takes, and yes, black is a rook up. For a moment, that's taken. So is this a big deal now after the rooks have been cleared off the board? Well, E2, it is a big deal because, yeah, there's a big issue with this pawn. It's very difficult to parry. We see check. Okay, Queen F6, Queen G3, Queen E6, check, check, Queen B7 check, check, Queen B7, Queen H1, King F4. The king comes back again. Is this to help the queen queening now with E1? So the king comes back again. Check. The king E3. King D2. Check. Queen F2 pinning the pawn. Queen E4. Yeah, white's feeling the pressure. King D1. Yes, it looks as though the writing's on the wall. Pinning the pawn for a moment. Queen C2. Very dangerous looking. King C1, Queen D1, check, but now look, yes, and it's crashing through, and there's no stalemate. There's always going to be B3 in worst case scenario. This B2 pawn, otherwise there might be a stalemate trick, as long as, yeah, well, it's unpinning the pawn, unfortunately, for white. Queen takes E1, otherwise that would have been a stalemate. Nearly. There's also King A1, pardon me, there's also King A1, forget that. So King A1, King C2 check, and here, okay, it actually ended here instead of Queen B1 being played. The game ended here. Okay, so your typical computer 196 move game between Leela and Stockfish. No, actually, the Stockfish wins are usually quite brief. They're usually like less than well, quite often, they're quite often less than 60 moves. So this was a mammoth game, 196 moves in total, created by this quite a lot of high-level shuffling, then a pawn sack. But what tilted Leela, I mean, further down, was this other pawn sack. It just didn't seem that well justified. And yeah, Stockfish creatively managed to resourcefully counterattack. But the spectacular coming down with the king, swooping down with the king, makes this game kind of special, I think, memorable. Okay, I hope you enjoyed it. And if you want to challenge me for a game, check out kingscrusher.tv or bit.ly/chessbold. If you register via either, I'll be able to invite you for a game after. There's also a suave chat forum at kingscrusher.tv/discord. There's playlists at bit.ly/Leela chess or bit.ly/Stockfish chess, etc. Okay. Comments, questions, likes, shares appreciated. Thanks very much.